really rapid presentation, 5 minutes and 1 minute for questions. 1 minute for questions after the presentation.
Thank you so much. Did you hear anything that I said before? So these lightning talks are going to be presented in 5 minutes. For the speakers, you should be paying attention to that part of the room where people are going to be showing you when you have 1 minute left for you to wrap up and conclude your presentation. This is a wonderful tradition that we have developed in this conference to open the space for students and other scholars who want to share in 5 minutes what they're working on. Some of them might want to get feedback, some of them want to share the final stages of the work, and so on. So this is wonderful, and we're going to have people that goes from high school students all the way up to not so young people, as some of them you will see like me later on. So I'm going to get going, and I would like to call for the first presentation, Rito Sui. I'm not going to be describing the biography, so hopefully you'll be able to see that in the QR, and also to save time. So, Rito Sui from Stanford, please come to the podium. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. I don't have slides, so hopefully the discussion will be scintillating enough by itself. I'm going to talk today about building tools for the house we want, confronting the genocide-ecocide nexus and climate applications of big tech tools. Big tech has made much ado about the ability of their tools, especially generative AI, to solve the climate crisis, right? It's a very bold assertion, not least because many of these claims are actually concerned with traditional AI tools, and even then few are backed up by scholarly or scientific evidence. According to recent research, actually only 25% of these public claims have academic citation, which is somewhat indicting. But I think that this kind of obfuscation, the smoke and mirrors, is really typical, right, of the big tech AI conversation broadly, but also its claims for climate kudos specifically. Lumping all these tools together makes it really difficult for us to discern where benefits accrue and where harms are derived. But as folks working to address the environmental crisis, I think it's imperative that we scrutinize these tools, our use of them, and our participation, willing or accidental, in the way that big tech's claims of climate aspirations belie a strategic decision, right? One that is designed to paper over the environmental concerns that I think we're all increasingly aware of, whilst also furthering this idea of generative AI as a central technology of significance. How are we going to do this? My pitch to you is that the genocide-ecocide nexus and its explicatory capabilities can mobilize how we think about big tech tools and the appropriateness of their climate applications. I know that some of you might wonder why bother, right? There's finite time, and that big tech is telling us we can counter the environmental impacts of now with the potential future climate solutions of tomorrow. And I want us to collectively reject this bad faith proposition, because addressing the environmental crisis is about, in part, an endeavor of world making, right? It's one that tells us that we need to reject the logics of destruction that brought us here in the first place. And what kind of future can we actually possibly have if we rely on these companies, many of whom have publicly declared a profound disinterest in both human and non-human worlds, right? Who have advanced highly misanthropic visions of the future, filled with uneven pain and uneven gain. So I'm going to talk to you about three things very quickly: the nexus, the materiality of generative AI, and the outsourcing of suffering, and draw out the way that this nexus helps connect often highly diffuse aspects of generative AI. And my central argument is this: that there is a fundamental and likely entirely irrevocable misalignment of big tech tools with visions of a just, equitable, and sustainable society. The nexus, then, is about the viability of both human and non-human life, the way that these are implicated within each other. Genocide is something likely more familiar in frame to most of us, when it's a crime of crimes, refers to certain acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a racial, ethnic, or religious group. Ecocide, meanwhile, has no legal definition, right? Mostly, though, it's about extensive loss, damage, destruction to ecosystems. And in genocide, we don't have a discussion of cultural or environmental destruction, which is why I think the two together help us advance an argument about what kind of tools we want. Because what they do is show us how both of these phenomena are driven by very similar logics, right? Histories, processes that collide to threaten human and non-human worlds. And it's the environmental crisis that reveals the stakes of this. Rapidly shifting, changing landscapes beget the kind of social and resource shocks that bubble up into violence, right? The conflict then in turn wreaks environmental havoc in its wake. So then the environment becomes both a victim and a vector of this fighting. It also, in the nexus, challenges us to regarding how we value human life, whether we think about it instrumentally, as ecocide can cause genocide, or innately, as I think a lot of indigenous scholars have argued, right, that ecocide is genocide because the human and non-human world binary is false. In either way, I think we get a really important way to situate the materiality of generative AI, the way it outsources suffering. On the materiality, I think we're more increasingly aware, right, data centers pollute, that there are vast natural resources required to power them. But I think what the nexus draws attention to is the sacrificing of environment for progress, right? This idea in developmentalism that actually certain spaces and people are easy to sacrifice in regards for this greater good of progress, right? But I think there are illuminating discussions in the nexus about how we think about colonial treatment of indigenous people and how ecocide and environmental destruction there causes the genocide and contributes to the genocide of indigenous people. In this current moment, I think we need to really scrutinize these ecocidal tendencies, these large extractive models that threaten social lives and the viability of many communities. Lastly, the outsourcing of suffering. AI is inherently a technology that's fueled by extraction, and I want to focus in particular on the recursive relationship between generative AI and conflict, which I think is especially timely. Because in the generative AI paradigm, war is rendered useful, right, by its ability to demonstrate real-time decision-making. That's the kind of security parlance, right? But what it really means is that the boundary between civilian and military life, I see a green sign that says time is up, 30 more seconds, I'm so sorry, is rapidly being erased, right? That the kinds of things that make it good and valuable for the environmental crisis are exactly the kind of things that make it good and valuable in these spaces that contribute to the environmental crisis that I think we would all agree we believe in things counter to. If we want a future where people on planet are happy, where they've been made whole, we have to think about whether or not the tools we're using are actually actively contributing to this. My argument is that they are purposely participating in producing the conditions of ecocide and genocide. In both cases, they're unfit for the house that I hope that we all want to build together. And so we need tools that are built on different logics, ones that we know what the genocide nexus tells us. Human worlds always depend on non-human worlds, and all of them are worthy of consideration. Thank you.
In case there are one or two very quick questions, very quick responses, please raise your hand. Going. Okay, thank you so much. The next one is going to be presented by Lynn Tu Hain, who is the Executive Director at Tutu. Thank you.
Everyone, can you all hear me? Lovely. Alrighty. I have some slides, so hopefully you're also paying attention to me while looking at the slides. But nice to meet you all. My name is Lynn Tu Hain. I go by Lynn Tu, or Lynn Tu Hain. All of those names work for me because it's a name given to me by Myanmar people. That's where I was born and raised. And in Burmese, my name means he who brings light is grand. And that's actually my occupation. I bring light to people in darkness for a living. Through my organization, Tutu, we pretty much bring energy independence and energy sovereignty to last mile communities. And when I say last mile communities, I mean rural communities, remote communities, indigenous communities, and native communities. Also communities who are under occupation or oppression by the government. You know, for us, climate justice or environmental justice has never been a question because we work in Myanmar. The question that we grapple with are things like what happens when the government breaks its promise to the people? What happens when authoritarianism takes over your country and your work is threatened? What happens when the government opposes your climate justice or electrification work? and that's what I want to share today. Myanmar has gone through a lot. In the last military coup, what we see is that post the military taking power in Myanmar, we saw a lot of civil war and conflicts. And this photo shows just a conflict within a 6-month period. And we can see about 4,000 instances of battles and combat taking place throughout the country. In this conflict, what we see is that refugee resettlement, both internal and external families resettling internally within Myanmar, and also families having to leave Myanmar to neighboring countries or other countries as refugees. We see that infrastructure has been damaged beyond repair, and we see that government institutions have been gutted. Now, as if that's not enough, we lived through a pretty bad earthquake last year around this time. And immediately following the earthquake, what we saw was that foreign aid was blocked. Last mile communities, the ones that I mentioned, have been isolated, and some of the pro-democracy regions were cut off from rescue workers. And this pretty much affirmed what we have always known, in that in authoritarianism, for dictatorships, for regime who don't quite care about what people think, energy can be a weapon. And that they do weaponize energy to hurt people, to quash dissent, to make sure that people don't have what it takes to live or to provide for each other. And pretty much what we did, what my organization did in response to this weaponization of energy, is that we built locally led energy ecosystems. Not products or services, but ecosystems that are self-correcting and self-healing. And throughout all of our conflicts, throughout COVID, what we saw was that we were able to sustain this resilient ecosystem to bring energy access to last mile communities. And when I say energy ecosystems, basically what it means is people. We invested into personal relationships, so we mobilized teachers, monks, nuns, neighbors, parents, students, who pretty much believe that energy access and energy independence is a human right for all of us. So, using this energy ecosystem to pretty much battle this weaponization of energy, what we ended up doing is 13 solar installations in response to an earthquake. That's within 6 months. When the first installation took place, the first installation from other rescue workers took place about 3 weeks into the earthquake. We were able to do it in 10 days. And while other people were working in communities and regions where aid workers were allowed to work, we went to places that are last mile. We went to places where aid workers weren't allowed to go. We went to places that would have never made it to the news. And throughout this work, what we ended up doing is 13 solar installations. We pretty much displaced around 24 metric tons of CO2 throughout that 6-month period with our solar installations, and we empowered about 25,000 people with energy access. And this is our way of showing that when we invest into last mile communities electrification, when we invest into community resilience, climate resilience is a natural benefit. When we work toward energy independence and energy justice, environmental justice is a given result. And with that, I am here to end my speech. Thank you so much for paying attention.
Any questions for you? Yes, please.
I really appreciate your work, and I'm interested in this idea of hubs for climate resiliency in these, rural communities. Could you share more about what that looks like in your case?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're not interested in reinventing the wheel, right? When we're doing energy access work or just electrification work, what we started is community nodes where people were already gathering. So these are places like monasteries, churches, schools, local centers. These places have existed way before the coup, the first coup, the second or the third coup, or even pre-colonization, these have existed. So we pretty much went to where communities were gathering in both regular times and also during natural disasters. And we pretty much said, can we provide power to your community space so that you can use it to power community activities during regular times, and you can serve as an emergency shelter during emergencies. And so we ended up, the places that we powered are emergency shelters, but they were mostly monasteries, mosques, churches. And these are the places that the UN doesn't always go to. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marshall, for bringing those interesting perspectives from that part of the planet. Now we have Urku Hanjeng, who is coming from Purdue University. Fantastic.
Hello everyone. I actually live in Bay Area. I just study at Purdue, so I didn't travel from all the way from Purdue, but I'm happy to be here in the local area and be happy to kind of be part of this conference. So what I'm going to be talking about today is actually a part of a work that is still ongoing that was started, I guess a co-production work with some communities in Louisiana where we're trying to understand the community-centered measures to flood risk, hurricane risk, and we actually better quantify those risks in these communities in Louisiana that are facing repeated hazards like hurricanes, like storm surge flooding, or pluvial flooding. So we were trying to actually understand what are the pain points of these communities, what are they actually feeling these impacts on. And when we talk with these communities, one thing that came up consistently was their access to essential services. And what I mean by that is, accessing hospitals, grocery stores, schools, daycares, or other similar things as well. So when they were talking about this situation, they were mentioning, okay, because we are getting hit by hurricanes back to back, every other year, and our population is declining, what happens is the services that we rely on is actually closing down or actually no longer in operation. So, for instance, a community in southwest Louisiana, in Cameron, this is one of the biggest economical hubs for Louisiana, where there's a lot of petroleum extraction happening, and a lot of people work in the petroleum industry. What they have to do is to rely on a grocery store that is 4 to 5 minutes away from the community, or even trying to get the gas, it's a similar story. Or somewhere in the east in Louisiana, you see in the Morgan City, which is actually protected city that has levee system throughout city borders. But what happens is the hospital the residents rely on in Morgan City actually shut down their OBGYN service, so they can no longer attract younger people who want to start families, so they now have to drive 2 hours for any kind of appointments with a doctor. So this is actually happening throughout the a coastal Louisiana as well as the nationwide in US. So what we were trying to accomplish was to actually measure the fragility of access to essential services, and how we did that is based on a co-production of some measures that I listed here that represents in a quantifiable way how does this access to essential services look like throughout different communities and different areas of the US. So what I want to show is this is the $1 billion disasters by region and disaster type since 1980 and 2024. And the reason I'm showing this by the regions is because of when we look into this access and the fragility of the access throughout the regions, we see actually a heterogeneity in terms of access. There are some areas that actually have much more fragile access to essential services, and which creates a situation. You can see, southern and midwestern states do actually have experienced more disasters, and their access is actually in terms of the worst when you compare with the other regions in the US. So that tells you in different services also, some regions actually have better access, but Midwest and South is consistently ranked lower compared to other regions. And I did this study in a nationwide just to identify some areas that needs focus in the federal level, but I also do it in a local level as well. So we did this study with the communities that I talked about in Louisiana, as well as some communities in Florida, and trying to expand it and make sure this can actually be part of the policy discussion. So when decision makers are making decisions about what to support or what to spend their money on, they're not leaving people behind without access to these resources when they rely on their services to provide for the economy and then their labor for the economy. So with that, I think I can finish my presentation a bit earlier. If there's a question, I'm happy to take it. Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Hi, thanks for that presentation. It's really interesting. You mentioned, you mentioned that some of the fragility and the difficulty of access is because of maybe population decline in some of these areas. But I wonder if maybe some of it is also attributable to the takeover of maybe community institutions and nonprofit institutions by corporate, for-profit entities, so that the loss of a hospital might be because of a for-profit hospital chain, for example, is taking over the local hospital. Is that something you're also seeing?
I think so. I think that's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up, actually, because the hospital I'm talking about is actually a private hospital, so they don't have incentive to provide services if it's not providing profit for them. So there is definitely a kind of structural elements of how these services are structured, and then are they owned privately, are they non-profit, are they government services? So you can definitely see, especially for services that are requiring more privatization, kind of not require privatization, but more private, such as hospitals, you see more discrepancies actually. But for the schools, that discrepancy is actually not as bad as hospitals. So maybe there is some kind of a reflection that states have to do, privatization has some kind of a effect that you might not want to actually see as well. So there's a debate like that. There's a point about the debate as well regarding privatization for sure. So thank you for bringing it up. But yeah. Do we have time?
Any other one? All right.
Yes, thank you.
The next presentation is by Julia Nilsner, who is the director of the Human Security Initiative. Thank you, Julia.
Apologies for the very busy slide. I was told I could only have 2 slides, so I really tried to fit as much as I could on there. My name is Julia. I run an organization called Human Security Initiative. We do, I call it academic adjacent research. It's research for advocacy, legal or policy advocacy. I'm a lawyer. I'm also a graduate of Stanford Law School and the International Policy Program. Some of you may also know me from my failed attempt to get into the PhD program at the Doerr School, and my and I ran a conference here a couple years ago as part of this series on climate displacement. So, stay close to Stanford. It's it's nice to be back, and I'm honored to be among you. So I'm here presenting some research that I did with the International Refugee Assistance Project on the impact of climate pretty much at every stage of the journey of migrants and displaced people seeking protection at the US-Mexico border. This actually began as a study on the ground that I did with some students at Stanford Law School 2 years ago. We went down to Tijuana, and we weren't sure at the time what we would find. We wanted to know whether climate had an impact on folks' decisions to leave their homes. And I had previously worked in advocacy more broadly for folks seeking asylum, and very, very rarely did anybody mention climate as a reason for their reason for leaving. But we just kind of wanted to explore whether there was something beneath the surface, and we thought maybe we'll find a couple of people who have had experiences with climate. But kind of as a backup plan for this report, we're going to also ask questions about climate impacts in transit, because I knew for certain there would be a lot of responses about people crossing through the Darien Gap, for example, crossing through deserts, attempting to cross the United States through desert train and being expelled, because I just heard so many stories on that. But we were actually shocked to find that almost everybody we spoke to had some kind of climate element in their reasons for fleeing their home in the first place. We just had to ask targeted questions. So what we kept hearing, and these were all folks from Central America and Mexico, where when we asked why did you flee their home, they would say, oh, because the gangs are trying to kill me. Oh, well, when did the gang move into your town? You're from Guatemala, you're a farmer, what was your experience during Hurricanes Eta and Iota? And asking these targeted questions, we would find that time and time again, people's communities became more vulnerable when disasters hit and their infrastructure was destroyed, and often governments did not respond adequately, and that left space for organized criminal groups to come in and take over. And we were really surprised by how many stories like this we heard. We put out a short report on this with IRAP, and then IRAP decided to kind of explore this in depth through collecting data on this. So with IRAP, we developed a survey that kind of integrated the questions that we developed on the ground into pick lists that served the purpose of nudging people to jog their memories about potential climate impacts where they came from. And we ran this over the course of about a year and a half from up until the end of summer 2025. We got 5,500 total responses. Of those, 80% were folks from the Americas. So our report ended up just focusing on the Americas. And you have some of the top lines here. There's a QR code to the report and the addendum that we put out to update it. And the report asks questions about disasters in folks' country of origin and also along the transit journeys. So just some top lines, a vast majority, so 44% of people experience disaster in country of origin. Of that 44%, 66% experience multiple disasters. Similarly, 47% faced challenges in transit. 24% experience both origin and transit impacts. The most frequently reported disasters in countries of origin were heavy rains, floodings, hurricanes, and extreme heat. In transit was extreme heat, extreme cold, heavy rains, and storms. And then what I think the more interesting insights that we gathered from this study was these specific impacts of disasters in country of origin. So we had a very, very long pick list that was informed by the work we had done on the ground. When I would ask, well, how did I would have to kind of ask these leading questions or to jog folks' memories about whether, well, did the schools close or the hospitals operating? And so we had a pretty extensive pick list of questions where we found that 40%, due to the disasters that they reported, lacked sufficient food and water. 34% said schools, hospitals, and other essential services were closed. 27% were driven into extreme poverty as a direct result of the disaster or disasters. 21% said their home were damaged or destroyed. And many reported the inability to make an income or that they were out of work for a while. And then similarly, we asked about physical challenges in transit only to those who answered affirmatively to whether they experienced disasters or extreme weather. So many reported crossing the desert on foot, crossing mountains on foot, crossing waterways, sleeping outside, lacking access to food or water. And then we were able to kind of put together more comprehensive stories with the open text responses. So I really wanted to make sure that at every step of the way we were including folks' own words, that they're direct testimonies. So that's why I put these quotes here on the slide for you to take a look at, because many people ignored this open text box, but many folks, thousands of folks, did provide responses about how specifically the disasters affected them, and from these open text responses, combined with the other data that we had in the survey, we were able to put together some comprehensive stories in some cases, and there's a QR code to the report there, where we have 50 quotes from direct testimony from people who filled out this survey. And I guess one striking example that was representative of stories we heard a lot was a man named Juan from El Salvador, who's a fisherman, and he said that he fled his home because of threats by gang members, and those gang members came in after a huge storm made. Oh, time is up. Okay. Well, I wanted to also, sorry I missed the sign before. I wanted to also share this project that we're working on more recently to kind of look at climate impacts here in the United States in detention centers and the way that folks are being treated through enforcement. Take a look at the website that we've developed that we are putting together stories of harm from all types of immigration enforcement action and specifically filtering any that have to do with environment and climate. And it's a work in progress. Would love anybody's feedback or collaboration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julia. You can find Julia later on if you want to in lunchtime, if you have questions. And Julia, you can try again, you know, if you want to get it. Now we have Sergio Sanchez from Stanford, and he's going to bring us to Colombia.
Hi everyone, my name is Sergio Sanchez. I'm a fifth-year PhD student in the IACRE program, Environmental Resources program. What you see in my hand took about 4,000 years to form. That is peat. That's decomposing organic soil made out of roots, grass, and leaves that haven't been fully broken because they have been underwater. Peat forms peatlands, which are a type of wetland ecosystem. Peatlands are carbon sinks. So there's no other terrestrial ecosystem in the planet that stores as much carbon as this type of ecosystem, which is why it's relevant for conservation. Disturbing this ecosystem releases a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, so we want to keep those gases and that carbon where it is. We know a lot about peatlands in Southeast Asia, which most of those peatlands are degraded because of oil palm plantations. But in South America, the peatlands are still relatively intact, and there's a massive knowledge gap between the social and ecological interactions people with the ecosystem. Specifically, we don't know or understand the relationship between the people living in this type of ecosystem and peat itself. My research tries to fill this gap. Using semi-structural interviews, I went to the departments of Meta and Guainía, which you see at the bottom left of the slide, to understand the socio-ecological interactions between people and peatlands. In the map you see the places where I conducted the interviews, as well as the extent of the peatlands that are nearby those communities. Our intention was to compare and contrast how these two different communities interact with the peatland ecosystem. The community in Guainía is around 96% indigenous, and the community in Meta is around 95% mestizo, which means mix. In the indigenous communities of Guainía, people are more connected to the ecosystem, as it happens often with indigenous communities. They fish, hunt, and gather resources in the peatlands, compared to the mixed community of Meta, where people do not really interact with the peatland ecosystem. Actually, they find it dangerous and even worthless. There are 2 carbon credit projects in the region, one in Guainía and one in Meta, one for each of the departments. However, they do not account for the carbon stored beneath. They only consider the carbon that's above ground, which means that people involved in these type of projects, they are not getting paid what they should. These projects have brought deep internal conflicts to the communities. There's lack of transparency. These have created a lot of problems. The contracts fail to consider local governance structures and the land cultural uses. Transparency and money have created conflicts between people, particularly in indigenous communities, where the lack of proper consultation process has led some communities to believe that this is a de facto taking of their land. Now I will share with you a little bit of why this research has a positive impact in the communities and goes a little bit beyond what we are used to in academic spaces, which is only publishing papers. With this project, what I tried to do was going back to the community to share the results with them, We held community meetings where we shared and validated our results. And in the pictures you can see me conducting the interviews with the people, and in the bottom you can see me in the community hearings where we were sharing all the information and the results that we got from the research project with the people. Just to share the conclusions of the project, when land is seen as an asset, land conservation becomes an obstacle to economic development unless it's profitable and meets the community needs. Peatland conservation strategies that adapt to the social and ecological context of the communities can ensure the long-term preservation of tropical peatlands. And, well, finally, market-based interventions may be more successful when paired with other community-based components that center in the community needs. For example, here you can see, or maybe not, in one of the slides, there's a solar panel behind me. This is another type of intervention that helps reduce emissions, and at the same time, it also has positive impacts with the communities. Thank you very much for your attention.
Now we move on to Anushka Vijay, and Anushka is going to be telling us about transition mineral mining. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Anushka. I'm an undergraduate student in the Earth Systems program, and today I'll be sharing my research in progress with the Securing
meaning the many tailings dams that could break down someday or not. So this is the question: how do these frameworks deal with the uncertainty, which is not probability? We don't know the probabilistic risk of something like Blue Marino happening and killing 200 people at one go. So, no, this is the question.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
uncertainty on what might happen with the tailing dams.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Definitely a huge problem in some of the Valley case studies that we're seeing, and IRMA doesn't really have frameworks or any indicators to see issues that could happen across the full scope of mining operations, like with tailing dams, so that's completely missed by these indicators. Some of the principles and protocols look at how FPIC is visible across like the full supply chain of mining and operations beyond the mine site, so the dams could be included in some of those, but generally the frameworks lack a way to be able to see accountability across the supply chain of the mining operation. So it's a huge gap in these frameworks.
I know there's no more questions, but people can ask later.
Yeah,
Is that okay?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you so much, Anushka. Last but not least, Ryan Masayezva from State University of New York.
Hello, my name is Ryan Masayezva. My work has been mostly involved in assisting the Haychuk Nation in the development of a management plan for a small island. That island is known as Yalakli to them. To us it would be called Goose Island. And a little bit of context, Goose Island is located within the Haychuk Nation. The Haychuk people are a coastal indigenous community located within the Great Bear Rainforest off the central coast of British Columbia. Something to really know about the Haychuk is that the Haychuk Nation is unceded territory, and so there's no real treaty to dictate kind of how management of the land and resources is going to be carried out, and that's led to some contentious relations with provincial and federal governments in the area, especially regarding the management of natural resources. And so what we've seen is sort of the Haychuk taking action and taking charge of really managing their natural resources in the area, especially through HERM, the Haychuk Haychuk Integrated Resource Management Department, which is their natural resources management department. And so what my work has kind of been focused on is helping them develop a management plan for this Goose Island. There's two real ecological problems that we've been really looking at. The first is there's significant recreational pressure from kayakers and yacht people who kind of stop at this island. They use it recreationally, they stop there, they hang out, they eat their lunch there, and then they just leave their garbage, their trash, and also human waste, because there's no latrines or anything built there, that just gets left on the island. And that's especially a big problem because there's also a pack of coastal wolves in the area. And these wolves really get into that waste, and that creates a very big problem management-wise because one, the wolves can be inbred, which can lead to a decreased immune response. And because these people leave, not only the people leave waste, but they bring their tiny little dogs onto the island as well. And they can carry parasites that wolves are especially susceptible to. And so those are two issues that we are really looking at to solve on the island. But another aspect of the work that we've been really doing has been identifying key tenets for how research can be done in collaboration with tribes by Western science. And so what we really looked for was, what we really drew a lot of inspiration from was the Manubi model, which was kind of developed through the collaboration between the Haychuk and universities in the area. And so we have a little illustration on the bottom right which was done by a local Hitchcock artist. It kind of demonstrates what Inuit is about. It means to become one in their language, and basically what it shows is taking Western science devices and techniques such as DNA and drone footage and all these things, and integrating it into, not integrating, but using it as part of Hitchcock management, and doing so, having that become part of their culture and their knowledge systems, because the Hitchcock are a contemporary people. Cultures evolve with time, and so this kind of shows that these aren't separate things, these are becoming integrated into their own society. And so some other things that we kind of identified through just looking at not only the Manui model, but other examples of successful sort of collaboration between universities and these nations. And some of the things we looked at were, one, the co-production of knowledge. This research isn't just used by universities, to answer their own questions. They're designed with input from the tribes to answer problems that they want solved. Another thing that's very important is the recognition of sovereignty. Indigenous governance authority is central to these sort of successful things. They really take charge of this, and they have final say. And that's a very key, important part of what makes these successful collaborations. Another thing that is really important is non-extractive knowledge exchange. A lot of Western science we see, they come into these communities, they do their research, they take this knowledge, and then they just leave. And they don't really educate these other communities in a way, or train them in the sciences. They just come in and they leave, and that is it's not. It doesn't build towards a successful relationship, which is where we're kind of going towards the sustained relationships. A key aspect of these sort of what makes these successful is ongoing sustained relationships. A lot of times before any research is even conducted, these researchers have been forming relationships, making contacts, living within community, sometimes for 20 years before real research has been done. And so, oh sorry, I'm seeing the time, that's up. But yeah, these were the key aspects that we identified, and yeah.
Let me check if there's one quick question for you before we go for lunch. If not, you can find right into lunchtime. Thank you so much. Well, fantastic set of presentations by students and leaders. So I invite you to go to lunch now, but I invite you also to come back at 1:15 for the second section of Lightning Talks. Please join me in thanking all the amazing speakers that have had in this session. Thanks.